please help me welcome Fatima Al Qadiri. Looking absolutely resplendent in that jacket, by the way, I have to say. We're going to start today with a video and some music, and then hopefully you can tell us the story behind it. So let's hope this works. So, can you give us a little bit of a story about that particular kind of music and what it means to you?
This is music of the Pearl Divers from a record called Anthology, the musical anthology of the Arabian Peninsula. And my grandfather was a singer on a pearl diving boat, and this is the kind of music that he performed for a living. And pearl diving was the main was the main economy in Kuwait before oil was found, and it was a very medieval occupation involving a lot of death, of course, because not everyone would come back alive from diving. And the role of the Naham, who was the singer on the boat, he was the only person that didn't dive. But still, being on sea for a 6-month journey wasn't exactly luxurious, you know, as you can see from some of the images on the video. They were wooden boats. The men were clothed in cloth and rags and used nose pegs or clothes pegs as...
Yeah, almost like a little chain around the back as well, yeah.
So that was their technology for diving. And this genre is called music of the sea. And it's just to illustrate Kuwait's kind of medieval past and its folk music, and how that's my... I come from a musical heritage, you know. My grandfather was a singer, even though music was considered a very lowly occupation.
Why so? Because a lot of times in the West, like, the role of the artist is quite exalted and romantic, but it probably wasn't like that from the way you're describing it.
I think music was still seen, unless it was classical music, folk music and pop music in the past was still considered lowly. I would argue that it wasn't a prestigious occupation. You know, you were a performer for hire. And in the Arab world, for sure, it wasn't something to be proud of. You almost had to conceal it, you know. In the case of my grandfather, in the 50s or the 60s, Kuwait TV decided to document the folk music of the country, and they came to him as a renowned Naham, which is a singer of sea music, but he renounced the documentation as television was a form of Satanism in his eyes, which just goes to, and he died before I was born, so I never met him. I never met the musician in my family or the musical figurehead in my family, and I think that he would definitely disapprove of me being a musician, also being a woman. Producing music is just not okay, you know, in his eyes.
And when it comes to the role of the family in that respect, what do you think the sounds of the kind of music that he was making and singing, how do you think that had an impact on you as a child? Because if you've never met him, obviously his legacy has stayed with you in that kind of music.
I mean, my father, even though he never made any music, was a huge listener and had a large record collection, and he played Kuwaiti folk music quite often, and wasn't shy of his father's occupation, even though some families would denounce their elders' relationship to music for prestige reasons or etc., you know, because it wasn't a respectable profession. And even the word artist in Arabic, I had a very funky experience recently where I entered Lebanon and you have to put your occupation in Arabic. And I wrote Fannana, which means female artist, and the man at immigration asked me if I was a dancer, which is, you know...
A stripper, basically.
Stripper.
Yeah.
I was like, do I look like a stripper? You know, but basically, you know, a female artist is... It's just not, it has a lot of negative meanings, you know, so, yeah.
So for a Gulf Arab woman, you're up against quite a lot in the structures of what you do right now.
Especially for production. Production is pretty much 100% dudes, you know, like I have yet to meet a woman from the Gulf that produces music professionally, you know. I know I'm sure there's girls that want to. There's a lot of women in classical Arabic music. There's a lot of women singing and performing, but writing is a different story. You know, it's, but I don't work in the Kuwaiti music industry, so I don't have to deal with them.
When you're speaking about the generations of music for your family, when it gets to your father, you said that he was a big listener. I know we've got an example of something that we could play that a lot of people will recognise, but not probably in the context that you remember it. Let's see if we can find this.
There it is.
Yeah, there it is, right. Do you want to just give us a little bit of a preface to this, or just
I think
let
you
it
should
play?
play it first.
Okay, right, we'll let it play.
Everybody pretty much knows this from every like Looney Tunes cartoon around. But my father randomly was doing graduate school in Moscow in the 70s and working at the Kuwaiti embassy at the same time. And the Kuwaiti ambassador in Moscow fancied himself as being a composer and was taking composition classes from this guy. who is Khachaturian, one of the renowned Russian composers of the 20th century. And my father became obsessed with Russian classical music because of his meetings with Khachaturian and his employer at the time. And so growing up, he was, constantly blasting Tchaikovsky and Rimsky-Korsakov and Khachaturian and other Russian composers, because I think that he felt more than the more Western classical composers that Russian classical music had an Eastern vibe to it and an Eastern melody and more relatable to Arabs. And I think that's how I got into classical music, is because of his obsession.
Yeah. And then, interestingly, your obsession with classical music as a child actually managed to inform one of your other young loves, which was video games. Yeah. Do you have a preference for something that we could play that would nicely illustrate this extra generational jump?
Actually, while I was researching for the gig tomorrow night, I noticed that quite a few of the 8-bit soundtracks were actually repurposed classical pieces. There's a lot of original classical music in early video games, but I wouldn't be able to pluck one. Does anyone have one off the top of their head? No.
I don't think we're quite as knowledgeable as you, but there is one that we could play that for the preface was on a Kuwaiti television when you were a child.
Oh, but that's cartoons. You're talking about video games.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Well, actually, this is probably a nice segue into how you use classical music. That was my fault. Thanks, Fatima. Right. Okay. So we definitely need the video.
I think this maybe needs a preface.
Yeah, that's
the Japanese cartoons. Okay, so basically in the 80s, Kuwait TV decided to dub some 70s Japanese cartoons into Arabic in Lebanon. So they were taken from Japan, paid for by Kuwait, dubbed in Lebanon, and they changed the theme music, and they changed, they dubbed everything in Arabic. And it's fascinating, and this is one of my earliest child memories, seeing these Japanese cartoons and just being exposed to this completely alien culture, let's say. It was my first interaction with manga or anime or whatever you want to call it. But this is just to illustrate how different the opening music is from the Japanese version to the Arabic version.
So this is the Japanese one first. So.
The name of this cartoon is in Japanese Tokimeki Tonight, and in Arabic it was dubbed as Ranzi Asahera, which is Ranzi the witch.
Is this the same?
رنزي رنزي الواقع يناديك والحب والأمال لا تسكن الخيال تعالي 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 تعال
Ranzi. But just to show you, I mean, I thought that, since I'm in Japan, I want to illustrate this like Japanese Kuwaiti connection, and which it happened very, very early in my youth. And I have no idea who was at Kuwait TV who thought, yes, we absolutely need to spend this much money fucking dubbing these cartoons. They weren't even dubbed in Kuwait. They were dubbed in Lebanon, like these are Lebanese singers and Lebanese voice actors that were doing this. It was just like such a major production, for an alien. I don't get it, but I thank the person from the bottom of my heart that was responsible for this.
So watching these cartoons at a remove, like almost different levels of remove from the original source, which would have been Japan, how did that affect your understanding of sound and visuals and how they work together through language? Because it's become such a facet of your work as a producer.
I think when you're a kid, you just take it for granted. You're like, oh yeah, these weird things, they just exist, Like, I never thought, I think as you get older, year by year, you question like, wait, why is this Japanese cartoon on Kuwaiti TV? Like, just with every year, it just became more intriguing. And obviously me and my younger sister lived in Japan for 10 years. So this really affected her. She went to university here. And she really pursued it. I got lazy and went to the States. But I think that exposure to, let's say, a Japanese narrative, let's say these cartoons are narratives. And, also, the stories are so weird. Like, this is a story about a girl who is a shapeshifter. Her father is a vampire. Her mother is a werewolf. It's just completely at odds with what's happening in Kuwaiti society at the time, which is, like, it's extremely conservative, and like there were some risque scenes. I don't know how it was just really incredible that we had access to that, But yeah.
There's one more. We're quite heavy on the videos, but I think the visual components of these sounds are so important to understand what Fatima does as an artist overall. There's one more that links quite closely to your upbringing of listening to classical music, which was a cartoon. We spoke about that one earlier.
Oh, yeah.
So this one is not. It is Japanese. It's not Japanese. What's the background?
I actually, maybe someone in the audience can tell us, but I think it's Italian.
Do we have any Italians in the room that could maybe? We do. Great. Okay, so maybe we get some help
Let
here.
me know, guys.
Okay.
Unlock the secret.
And strangely, I recognised the sound to this, but I never knew what it was too. So, definitely. Do people recognize it?
So this was like the beautiful marriage between animation and classical music. For me, I saw it around the same time as the Japanese cartoons and listening to Russian classical music. I was like, yes, this all makes sense,
Which is insane because it's also disparate, but as a child it made sense to you. What do you mean by it made sense?
I mean, it's just like the connection, it's like, having being exposed to animation and classical music together, you know. And I don't know, there was also this like futuristic element of it, you know.
Especially with that one,
Yeah,
definitely.
definitely
Yeah.
with that one. But I just remember, you know, this is one of my very earliest childhood memories, is watching this video and just like scurrying up to the screen and like being distraught when it was over, you know.
So, to give a sense of a time frame, when you're in Kuwait as a child watching all this, what is the kind of chronology for you up until, for example, the invasion?
I mean, I'm born in 81, and the invasion was 1990. So this is happening from 81 to... I mean, actually, no, that's not accurate. 80s, from 81 to 83, I was born in Senegal. I was born in Dakar. So 83 is when we went to Kuwait. So from that time onwards, we're in Kuwait.
And a lot of what we're speaking about right now is the experience of watching cartoons and listening to music and playing video games. We'll probably get to that a bit later on, but it's all a very indoor experience as a child. Could you kind of develop upon your experience growing up in Kuwait just before the invasion and how the invasion really changed that?
I mean, there is some indoor. The invasion is when it gets 100% indoor. But before the invasion, no. I mean, if you're a kid, if you're a girl under the age of 10, it's okay for you to wander the streets. Over the age of 10, it's not okay for you to wander the streets. So, but even the streets are just, it's like sand, you know. You're not losing out, you know. You're not missing much out there. But it was a relatively, it was kind of like a sensory overload, you know, because Kuwait was very safe at the time. We had, you know, almost negligible crime rate. Every time there was a robbery or something, it was like, there was a one page in the paper for crime, that the entire national crime fit on one page in the newspaper, you know. It was just like, it was so negligible. But yeah, I think I was just like just constantly consuming, you know, visual and musical information from both my parents and whoever was the comptroller of Kuwait TV, who deserves flowers for life from me. You know, I don't know who that person is.
But when it came to the late 80s, early 90s, things massively changed in Kuwait and completely changed your life. I know that the experience of the invasion directly influenced you starting to produce music. Could you give us a little bit of a background about that before we perhaps play a track to illustrate it?
Yeah, I mean, the invasion happened in August 2nd, 1990, so it was the very end of the summer. And, you know, also being a kid, you're very selfish. You don't want the summer to end. And so when your parents are like, we've been invaded, also the idea of invasion was so foreign. I didn't know what it meant. I'd never heard it before. And I was like, me and my younger sister were like, great, no school, wow, this is awesome. You know, it's just like, woo, we were so happy. I mean, just like day by day, we were like, oh, fuck, you know. But the first, I would say, months, it was awesome, you know. But
what did you do?
I mean, we just like continued, you know, the summer didn't end, you know. It was just like and I think I'm very lucky, extremely lucky that me and my younger sibling were so young, and we could just fill our time with playing with toys and playing video games and whatever, you know. But my older sister was 13, and it was just like a completely different experience for her, you know. But it just became more insular, you know, because we had to be indoors all the time because there were soldiers on every block, and our habit for playing video games began, but it just became more. I mean, what could our parents do? We were just inside the whole time. We had to fill, you know, our time with shit.
And your parents as well. They were both had very important roles in their own ways.
I mean, they were working for the resistance, so they were like, yeah, just play video games, do whatever the fuck you want. we're doing this thing, My father tried to give us an Arabic lesson a day, but we were so not having it. We were just like, ugh, no way, which I thank him for his attempt for doing that, but we were just, no. If there was no school, there was no school.
And also the relationship between the video games and your family. I know that something quite dramatic happened to your father whilst you were playing a video game, and
yes.
you weren't even aware of it.
I mean, I became aware of it maybe an hour later, but basically during the invasion, because my parents were members of the resistance, we had to move from house to house because their names was on a list for execution. So we just, our family members had gone to wherever for the summer and were stuck, like many Kuwaitis were stuck outside of Kuwait for the entire period. And so we were just moving from house to house, and the house that we were in on that block was a kid with Castlevania, and I would find any excuse to go to his house.
So what is Castlevania, for those that don't know?
I mean, at the time, it was a game on originally called Vampire Killer. It was a game on the MSX machine, which was just a little keyboard with a slot for a cartridge, but it was a computer keyboard. There was no joystick or anything. And I barely knew this kid. I just wanted to play the game. So he was cool, but I was like, okay, let's do this, And that day, my mom and my sisters, I think, had gone to visit someone, and I was unsupervised and went over and was playing Castlevania. And in the hour that I had gone, my father was taken from the house by Iraqi soldiers to a prison camp in Iraq, in Basra. And I was spared witnessing that scene. And when I came back to the house, there was no one there. And when my mom came back, she said that your father has gone to Switzerland, which I found hard to believe. So I knew something was up. But yeah, so Castlevania has this very special memory, let's put it this way. But
But it's interesting, as horrible as it is an experience, what is interesting from a point of view of how this has influenced you going forward is that the soundtracks to these games are tied up with a trauma, and trauma as a prolonged experience over a period of time, and these certain sounds and certain images, they trigger this. So it's a drawn-out kind of experience where the music that you made from it was you trying to help someone else visualize something that they can't see, and that in turn you didn't even see in the first place. So it's interesting to see how the use of video games in your work and the experience of the invasion kind of are all tied together. I think it'd be quite good to play an example of this from the EP that was inspired by all of this, yeah? Do you have a preference for which track?
I think you can play Ghost Raid because it's about a very specific, it's about aerial bombing,
Okay. You don't need to watch this. You don't need to watch this, it's just my iTunes, it's nothing too grand. So what is the name of this EP, and what was the name of it directly influenced by?
Desert Strike was named after a Mega Drive, Sega Genesis in the States, game, I think by Electronic Arts, if I'm not mistaken. But it was made exactly a year after the liberation of Kuwait, and I remember buying it, seeing, it was based on Operation Desert Storm, the title, which was a real military, it was a military operation that the Allies took part in to repel Iraqi forces. And I remember buying it and putting it in. And the first scene from the game, there's this like long scenario that plays out before you start playing a game of a man being lowered into a cauldron. And there's a war museum in Kuwait that has graphic scenes of torture of Kuwaitis by Iraqi soldiers that children are taken to. And I remember immediately after the liberation, when school started again, we were taken to the war museum, and I was like, are you fucking kidding me? You're like showing the graphic scenes of torture to like 10-year-olds, you know? This is nuts. But seeing that in the video game was like, wait, what is going on? And they didn't use the name Saddam. It was just like this, like, you know, alternate universe that looked the same, you know? And then the game started and there was no music. It was just the sound of the chopper, which was like this really horrible frequency, and the sound of like bombs dropping. And it was just like an aerial view going around the desert. And it made me realize this game was not made for the entertainment of children. Children are not entertained by this shit, you know? Like, there's no music. There's like nothing even remotely childlike about this game. It was made for what I believe. I really believe that it's the first like military training video game. Just ulterior motive for this game was to train the military, and not for the entertainment of children, adolescents, anything, you know?
So this is some music inspired by that game, so. Could you have a big hand for that track? It's one of our own productions. Now, what is really interesting about that EP is that although it is a body of work inspired by the soundtracks of video games, and not just the soundtracks produced for them, but also the sounds within the games, that isn't an EP loaded with samples. Can you speak a little bit about how you actually made those kinds of records and how you went about recreating those kind of feelings in the tracks?
I think that one is not so much inspired by video game soundtracks. It's inspired by the lack thereof. And Desert Strike didn't have a soundtrack, you know? So I made one for it. It just had the like sickening frequency of a chopper. But I think, you know, it has to do with it being when me and my sister, towards the end of the invasion, towards the time of the aerial bombing, came across a keyboard in the house and started making music together. And that first piece that we made together, neither of us remember, sadly, but I remember the one that I made after. But I started making music and memorizing little melodies on a keyboard and recording them on tape until the age of 19. So from 9 to 19, the keyboards just got bigger and the tapes got longer, you know? But around 19 is when I started, I was in the University of Miami doing a composition course and had access to a studio for the first time, which was very exciting. But the only samples in Desert Strike really are the sounds of, you know, gunshots and explosions. Everything else is written, you know.
Okay, in that respect, we've spoken a lot about the Gulf so far and how you relate the familiar and the unfamiliar. So maybe we'll take this personal geography to a different place and play something off your album. I think I would quite like to play the opening track, if you don't mind, because I think there's... Oh, it's up to me. Okay. Okay.
能进不去，那人不轻言对峙，顺势而退，居安思危。感情本就不难，早就曾领会，何必分出谁错谁对？ 暂未交兵，自然也杜绝了无边繁凉。于是乎，可避免发生局势。哪个赢了吃香喝辣，真是这样啊？过于认真，让彼此都难堪，太冲动，恶意相勾。 所以爱伤害成此，沉默是深情缘由。结了冰水也会变得坚烈如铁，炸出的血象征悲壮。 身在夜晚呼啸风里，茕茕激励天灵，这还是回归，祈求着收藏，消除掩埋，别让那天空一片死灰，瞳孔看见全是有。 年轻充满热血，只懂得前进，还不够聪明。
Now, what was brilliant about playing that to a room full of people, and so many people aren't familiar with that album, when everyone started to switch and they realised what it was and what it was not. Could you give us a little bit of a story about how that track came to be and how it actually was the start of the album?
Yeah, I mean, I've recounted this many times, but basically there's this art collective in New York called Shanzhai Biennial, and they were making a work at PS1 that involved finding a fake version. By fake, I mean that the lyrics were completely wrong. Of Nothing Compares to You on YouTube. And then they got this professional singer, actually she's in a punk band, to sing it. And they wanted me to they sent me the a cappella and they said, can you please make us a cheap Chinese version of this, which is their exact words. And I was like, oh, okay. And I sent them this, and they were like, "No, this is too sophisticated. We can't use it." I was like, "Oh shit!"
So that's interesting itself because it's too sophisticated to be what a Chinese.
A cheap Chinese version of. I mean, they wanted to create. They were shooting this video that was like high def, really, really high def, beautiful video, and they wanted the music to sound like shit. They wanted the music to sound like it came from a corner shop, you know. And I knew that's not what I did, you know. It doesn't sound like, to me, this sounds like Chinese Gotham City, you know. And they were like, "Sorry, we can't." I literally was on the phone for them. No, yeah. And then I was like, "Fuck this! I want to use this track," and that's how it started, you know. So
when you say a Chinese Gotham City, this is a different perspective of China, like an imagined China. Could you explain what you mean by an imagined China when you're creating tracks like these? Because the album is essentially devoted to the idea.
I mean, just imagine China, just very briefly, is just a China that doesn't exist. It exists in it exists in a collective imagination over decades, if not centuries, you know? It's like a series of stereotypes that are bricks that have been put to create a pyramid of stereotypes and a pyramid of illusions created by decades and centuries of Western collective imagination, you know?
And when you're building that pyramid of an imagined China, what are the blocks within that pyramid? Like, what were you thinking of when you were making this record?
Well, you know, blocks are just experiences that you've had with pseudo-Chinese music, pseudo-Chinese imagery, pseudo-Chinese rituals, whatever it is, you know? Like, I quote Lady and the Tramp, "We are Siamese, if you please," in the record, because it was an early exposure to this pseudo-Chinese and imagined Chinese narrative, you know?
And in terms of production, that might sound a little bit theoretical maybe and a bit heavy, but in terms of the production, it was actually fairly effortless for you to find these samples because they're already part of the software that you use, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. It's like in Logic, I didn't notice until I started making this record that there's an Asian kit, you know, just like it's there. It's, you know, Asian kit. Like where in Asia's a huge motherfucker. You know?
Yeah, the idea of Asian meaning, you know? Chinese.
Yeah, this is another thing that the record highlights is this idea of the word Asian, you know, is like, every time somebody, you know, we all love to think that we're individuals, and people from around the world love to think that we're individuals. And, you know, if you were to refer to a person from whatever country as an entire continent, you know, it makes sense to you to group everybody together. You know, like there's that website, Africa is not a country. You know, it's like...
That's exactly what I was just
Asia
thinking.
is not a country. Asia is not a country. Asia has the craziest amount of, like it maybe is the most diverse continent in the world, you know? So to call someone Asian or something Asian is doesn't make any sense. It's just grouping the most diverse languages and cultures and whatever into just one monolithic whole, you know?
So the tracks in the album and the idea behind it is a way to try and confront something like that from your own perspective?
It's just about, you know, the record like explores the idea of like monolithic ideas, generalizations, false narratives, false historical narratives, colonialism, you know, like the legacy of colonialism. It partly has created this false China, you know?
And also from a personal perspective, it very much, obviously the opening track is quite different to the rest of it, but do you think we should play something off the album that's not the opening track, just so people get a sense of what the rest of it's like, or?
Yeah, sure,
Yeah,
whatever.
Sure. I almost didn't start that sentence. What should we do? Actually, yeah. So in terms of a personal geography, you're trying to make, well, you have made, not trying to, you made an album about an imagined China from the perspective of a Kuwaiti woman who's lived in the States. But you're using it with the kind of loose template of a genre that's very much of a very particular city, which is London. What is your relationship with grime music, and how did this tie together in the album?
I guess the thing is with grime is, you know, I was exposed to it in, I want to say 2003. And as soon as I heard it, as soon as I heard Wiley specifically and his production, I was like, okay, game over for everybody. You know, it just sounded like the most timeless music. It sounded like someone had taken video game music and advanced it into the realm of, like, let's say classical composition, whereby you couldn't guess what was going to happen in the next 4 bars. You knew it was repetitive, but you still didn't know how everything came together. How did this? It was just such a puzzle. You know, even if it repeated, I was like, I still have no idea what's going on. You know, and you know, the thing about futuristic music, the most futuristic music is the music that is timeless. Is that if you listen to it 20 years, you're like, I don't understand. You know, and I instantly had an affinity to grime because also it was so it was very digital, which appealed to me. You know, and it was very raw and very menacing. You know, I had this menacing. It had a taunting, which is also part of like the sparring of MCs, you know, it's like taunting each other, cutting into each other. But there was a playground vibe to it, you know, like even if they get really violent with their threats, I'm still like, nah, you don't mean this. Even though some people have been killed over it, so it's not really a joke, you know. And, you know, several and many and countless MCs have gone to jail, blah, blah. You know, it's like it's a long... but from a production aspect, to me, there was this reference to video game music because early on it was made on PlayStations, as some of you know. And Predator said something really beautiful in an interview. I don't know where exactly, but he said, grime is freedom. That's how he characterized grime. And so that meant everything to me. It's like you can just do whatever you wanted. And so much of my music, the beats are made haphazardly. I'll be the first to admit it. It's like I was never a beat maker. I'll never classify myself as a beat maker. I used melodies. That's my forte, and I was instantly drawn to the melodies of grime, and the sounds of it. So a lot of the way that I work in production is interpretation of existing ideas. So it was interpreting grime, and there's Sino-grime is not a real genre. It's more like a fossil that was dusted off, and I was like, oh yeah, these dudes all made like Sino-grime, and like Code 9 was the person who kind of identified, he was like a scientist in the lab and like found these molecules that were doing the same thing, but nobody gave it a name.
Just for the sake of context for people who aren't aware of that, what do you mean by that term?
I mean, it's basically Sino-grime is grime that made use of quote unquote Asian motifs, and there's a few producers that were making that. Jammers is a big example, but not being aware. It wasn't a scene. There was no Sino-grime night or whatever, It was just something that happened. And that's what I was trying to also explore with Asiatisch, is that producers from the States, from the UK, from wherever else were drawn to Asian motifs in music as a way of using it in a kind of competitive way with each other, as a taunt, like as I'm stronger than thou, like it was used as a kind of holy weapon, like as a kung fu master type of thing.
Yeah, it's angry, but it's also really elegant in how it's executed. Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like, it's kind of a martial art. It's using the language of martial art in music. It's like elegant moves, etc. It's not brute force. It has more. It has more of a philosophy or more of an eruditeness or whatever. It has more of a strategy behind it.
And that's not the only example of you being influenced by grime. We've spoken mostly about your own solo work, but you do collaborate with other people. And I think it'd be good to play a collaborative track that's inspired by grime and that works with vocalists, and it's a group one.
The Future Brown one?
Yeah.
Okay.
And also, congrats on getting signed to Warp Records. That is absolutely amazing with that.
Thanks.
So for the history of Future Brown, could you explain who Future Brown are, as well as yourself, and how you met?
Future Brown is Esma Maroof, Daniel Pineda, who are both producers as Nguzu, and myself and Jamie Emmanuel Friedman, who's goes by the name J Kush and runs the label Lit City Tracks. And I mean, we all kind of met in 2010, in New York, and decided to collaborate as Future Brown in 2012.
Cool. So this is quite a recent one for you. So yeah, this is a Future Brown record.
Wanna party, put some liquor in your body. Fuck this club, let's get drunk. Why you talking to me? Don't you wanna party, put some liquor in your body. Fuck this club, let's get drunk. Why you talking to me? Let's go stupid, where's my music? Hit that dance like you wanna abuse it. Don't say shit when I'm in my zone. Mix that shit with with a little Patron. Little more turn up, leave 'em with a boner. Baby, you a dog, let me make that owner. Meet my friends and let's make plans and let's get fucked up while we can, right? These bitches ain't loud enough and these niggas ain't throwing shit. Family cooped in the back of the club and you best believe that I'm pouring shit. Feel that up in your chest, bitch, you better move like a fucking reflex. I'ma wild out like I'm strapped in the vest. And if you want some, you can be my guest. Be my guest, I'm not impressed. Now put that rookie ass nigga in a dress, cause he ain't on much and I'm too important. These hip pumps, you can hardly afford them. Don't waste your time or waste my drink. Out my mind and I can't think. I'm fucked up in this club, so why you talking to me? Don't you wanna party? Put some liquor in your body. Fuck this club, let's get drunk. Why you talking to me? Don't you wanna party? Put some liquor in your body. Fuck this club, let's get drunk. Why you talking to me? Don't you wanna party? Put some liquor in your body. Fuck this club.
I hope that woke you up. Now, so this is yet another segue into another style of music that you work with, which is R&B, because that was a singer Tink on that track, wasn't it?
I think that's more of a rap track than R&B. But she's a singer.
We can pick it over.
She's a singer and a rapper, so it's a little, this was made for her like as a club track. She asked for a club track. So yeah.
And with your work with Future Brown, it's very explicitly music that you make for live artists, live recording artists. What was the thinking in starting Future Brown and how you felt that you could work together with a group of people? Because I remember a really interesting thing that you said, that as a solo artist, you find it quite hard to physically realise your own ideas, and that's why working in a group was really interesting for you. What did you mean by that?
I don't... I guess, there's a lot of things that you can do by yourself, but with collaborations, it's just like the more the merrier. I don't know. I just feel like, you can... there's this... me and Jamie randomly saw this documentary right before Future Brown was formed about the making of Michael Jackson's Bad album and how many producers worked on that album, including Quincy Jones and Michael as executive producers. And we were like, wait, we need to we need to work with a bunch of people to like make really serious records, I mean, I feel like it's fine for me to make instrumental music or occasionally sample vocals, whatever, but I feel like, and like I said, because I don't really consider myself as a beat maker, like the four of us working together, we can achieve much more, especially making music for vocalists. It's hard for individuals to do it, like we just feel like as a team, we have more power musically,
And also, correct me if I'm wrong, but I read that you don't like to perform live at all. You just like to DJ.
Yeah, I don't perform live. I mean, the idea of performing virtual instruments, I think you have to, first of all, be like a really serious like gear programmer person to like perform stuff that's completely programmed in a computer. For me, I feel like, I don't know, I don't see it as being a very entertaining thing to watch, I wouldn't, if there's not a live singer or something, I'm not gonna get into it,
And so that's almost the purpose of Future Brown, in a way.
Yes and no. I mean, I feel like performance is a separate field, like production is one field, performance is another field that you have to invest time in, etc., etc., etc. And I would rather be making music than performing. It's that simple,
Okay, so we've managed to travel quite a wide a wide area. We've been to the Gulf, we've been to the States, we've been to London. It'd be quite nice to go back to the Gulf and talk about some more collective work that you do. Could you explain what GCC is?
GCC is the name of the collective is based on the Gulf Cooperation Council, which is a 6-nation, let's say, socioeconomic pact, much like the EU. It's like calling yourself EU, or NAFTA or whatever, And we're 8 artists from the Gulf, and we create work dealing with kind of hidden rituals of the region.
And what do you mean by a hidden ritual?
By hidden, like, how much do you know about the Gulf? Let's face it, you don't know anything,
Hey, that's not fair.
I mean,
I know you.
You know very little. Whatever the media is feeding you, it's not, also there's so much being undocumented in the region that it's just an area that's full of so much visual potential to crystallize, and like explore, etc. So yeah, there's so much. Like, this is the thing. Most people, what they know about the Gulf is Dubai, and Dubai is not the Gulf. Dubai is its own kind of Babylon. It has very little to do with the real, the rest of the Gulf. So it's just wanting to delve into our into our native region and explore things that are happening that nobody is exploring, really.
And what do you think is happening that you can explore in GCC? Because there's this phrase that you've used in other interviews called Gulf futurism.
Gulf futurism doesn't really have a lot to do with GCC, I have to say. I mean, Gulf futurism is a term coined by Sofia Almeria that has to do with the mutation of the region, the physical mutation of the region. And GCC is exploring the present, and has little to do with the past,
I thought we could actually, speaking of her, I thought we could play one of your videos
Sure.
that she's directed. Are we good for that? Is it working?
Uh-uh.
Or no? I think someone might turn the TV off. Yeah, so who is the woman that directed this video?
Sophia Maria is an artist and filmmaker from Qatar. Her father is Qatari, her mother is American. And I met her, I think also in 2010. Or 2009 maybe, when we worked together on a proto-GCC work.
Okay, let's have this Now, that might not be a typical framing of Arab women in a music video, the fact that they're even in the music video at all. I'm curious as to how that sort of video and that sort of sound relates to your ongoing relationship with the Gulf. Because it's also very interesting that in the video they have a Bluetooth code. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Bluetooth was banned in Saudi Arabian malls because of how young people shared images of each other.
Oh yeah. I mean, Bluetooth in malls in the Gulf is like instant hookup. It's like Grindr for straight people, you know? It's like, if you turn on your Bluetooth, you're gonna find stoned Kuwaiti, I don't know, you know, like Kiss Me Now, whatever it is, you know? And they're just like, it's just a very silent way of communicating with someone, in a very clandestine way of communicating with people in a room and getting their information and their digits and whatever, so you can later hook up, you know, like without your parents knowing, without anybody knowing around you, you know.
So is that quite a Gulf Arab experience for young people, that living through screens, like you lived through video games and cartoons, and now young people are living through the internet and their phones, it all...
No, but even when I was a teenager, you know, it was like, you couldn't date people, you could only marry them. You had, all the dating stuff had to happen very, very under the carpet, you know, like it was just very, very difficult. It was like all on the phone, you know. You talk to a boy for like 6 months before meeting him, and you're like, ew. Or whatever. It was just like, it was just a phone on a voice on the phone. It was like, it was all about illusion, you know, like creating illusions about relationships, and it still exists today. Except now people have like multiple phones for multiple personas, you know. It's all about creating a persona as far as Arab dating is concerned. I think it's like catfish, but on a national scale. You know, it's true. But with this, actually Sophia is the one that taught me about this, let's call it a genre of dancing. It's called Ma'alaya. I had no idea this existed in the Gulf. Like, she revealed something to me, which is, well, this is what I mean by hidden. It's like, I'm from the region, I didn't even know this existed. You know, this is how like secretive everything is, you know, like also if you're not a man, you know less because you have access to less public and private events, you know? So I had no idea. And this is mostly popular in the Emirates. And there's some, I mean, the women are always fully clothed, but the dancing is, you know, hypersexual, and there's children at these events. I mean, it's just the most, if you watch videos of this stuff, it's like, it's the most bizarre thing. You would never think that this stuff was happening over there.
So with the idea of things being almost like in plain sight, but also hidden, how do you try and work through that in your music with the idea of these like traditions and new technologies of the Gulf?
I mean, traditions, I don't think, the only thing that maybe comes into my own personal music from traditions, I think, is how the beats are so disjointed, you know? Because if you listen to that, for instance, that first song that we played, the music of the Pearl Divers, you know, beats are, I want to say weird, you know, they're made using clay pots and glasses and rhythmic hand clapping, and if you listen to Kuwaiti folk music in general, it's a combination of several things. It uses Indian instruments, Indian drums. It uses Tanzanian rhythms, Tanzanian beats. I only found this out because I accidentally stumbled upon Tanzanian folk music, and I was like, wow, this is crazy. It sounds exactly like Kuwaiti music. And Saudi Arabian or Arabic lyrics, there's Iranian influence. So the entire, like, just the 360, everything that's around Kuwait inspires it. Inspires its folk music. So it's just this like weird combination of a lot of different things. And but for visually, obviously GCC is exploring the present, you know, the here and now of Gulf rituals,
Seeing as we're managed to do a whole loop from the past to the present, I think we could probably wrap that up. So can we have a massive round of applause for Fatima Al Qadiri? Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask?
Hey, this question has to do with something we've been discussing with other girls from the academy, and how do you manage developing your music in a space that has a lot of like stereotyped elements, like Arabic music, being a woman, that Asian sound you were talking about? I feel that too because I'm Chilean. I'm from Latin America, so Latin American sound has other way of being stereotyped. And is that a conscious work for you when you make music, like in moving what your music means? Because you come from linguistics, and because for me your music doesn't sound like stereotyped. It's very free with such different elements, and maybe an advice on that.
I mean, I feel like, you have a lot of questions to that question. I mean, okay, the thing with being a woman, you just have to ignore. You just have to ignore it. You just have to act like you're not different. And that's my best advice to you, and not let it be a problem, like, and when it does become a problem, you try to ignore it harder, that's just, that battle is not going to end anytime soon. So you just have to face it by, not letting it get to you, with the other, Latin America, South America, like it's just, when you're grouped in these ways, you have to, the only thing you can do is try to educate people around you in the politest way that you can, because some people just haven't had a friend like you to talk them through their stereotypes that they've been fed by their society, by their elders, by whatever, by their peers. So wherever you go, just be kind and patient and explain. And if they're nice people, you'll change their mind, Does that answer your question?
Yeah, but it was also about that, because you really use your Arabic tradition, music in a musical way. So and it's not like a stereotyped way of working on that. It's just not Arabic music. It's not just.
I think the thing is with every culture that it has one element of it that's is not explored by its own native population. Like I'm sure in Chile there is some aspect of your musical culture that no one has thought to play with, and that's like creating stuff is playing. I mean, I know in Japanese music, Japanese folk music, Japanese, there's so many things that the Japanese haven't messed with yet. I'm gonna mess with them. But like, I just, the thing is with the religious anthems, they have been used, they have been sampled in the past by Westerners, but the same thing with Chilean music or whatever that you're interested in. It doesn't even, when you're using something that's not from your culture, you have to be able to explain why, because then you're accused of appropriation, which is somebody just using something blindly for whatever reason, without being mindful of where that thing comes from, you know? So, yeah, I would just say dig in your own backyard, you know?
Thank you.
Anybody else?
I was hoping you could just elaborate on the video and like what finding that style of dancing meant to you, and then what broadcasting it meant to you, and all the little messages that were like flashing. And yeah, I just wanted to hear more about it.
I mean, Sophia made the entire video and she showed it to me after it was done. And I mean, it was like, you know, imagine if you think you know something but you don't. Like if you think you know everything about your culture but you don't. But that's the reality of being in the Gulf. It's coming from a very, very secretive culture. And when I say secretive, I mean there's so much that's not in the public realm, you know? And the internet has facilitated for those things to come to the public realm, but you have to know about them to search for them. You can't search for this stuff not knowing what it's called, you know, like not knowing it exists. That's how she was able to find it, because she had heard about these private events. They're all private. They're not open to the public, where this kind of dancing happens, etc. So, and because she's from Qatar and lived for some time in the Emirates, so she knew. I mean, the message is, the name of the song is How Can I Resist You? And it's about this, you know, coming from a very conservative culture where you're not allowed to do anything in public. You can't kiss someone in public, blah, 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 you know? Like, you have to really resist temptation at all times, etc. And behind closed doors, anything goes, you know? But that's the reality of the region, is that there is this extreme disconnect between public and private.
Oh, there's a person at the back. Can we get a mic? Try at the bottom there, love.
I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great.
Thank
Hi,
you.
this is Massi from Italy. And I have a question which is not about the Italian music you played before for us, but it sounds, listening to your music and listening to you speaking today, it sounds a lot like most of your work is about what false and what's true, what's a stereotype, and identity, and what identity means. Now, if this word has a meaning or not. And so I was wondering, since you just told us that you've been growing up with some of your imagery formed by this Japanese cartoon, how does it feel like to be in Japan now and to perform in Japan soon? And if you performed before, even though you don't like the word performing, but I mean, proposing your work in here, and how the stereotypes who has been growing in your mind do reflect in your actual life, spending some time here.
This is maybe my 6th time in Japan. So the first time I was here was in 1993, which is a long time ago. But my sister lived here for 10 years, so I visited her many times. But this is the first time that my music will be amplified in Japan while I am present in the room. Just gotta be honest, you know. But yeah, I mean, I feel like, you know, the thing is with exploring, reinterpreting. I think the idea of interpretation is taking something and making it into something else. You know, how people interpret passages from the Bible or whatever, you know, it's like things are not black and white. Even if something is written, you can always divert the meaning of a sentence, you know? And I think this is how I approach music, is that no matter how you think something should be, and this is why I made the record genre-specific experience, is that, you know, because something is a BPM and has this synth in it and has this kind of clap or kick drum, doesn't mean that it's this genre, you know? Like nobody decided that, oh yeah, this is this or this is that or whatever, you know? Like I just feel like the way that categories exist to contain music, to contain people, to contain ideas, these are all false, you know? These are made to control people, and they are the reverse of freedom, you know?
Is there anybody else, or are we all good for questions? Oh wait, we have another one.
Hi, I'm Chelsea. I kind of wanted to ask about, in terms of art making, I feel like digital art has this kind of innate streak of maybe snarkiness, but like it's an enjoyable, like humorful way to express ideas, which is like maybe in any other medium would be really laborious to achieve. I just wanted to know, like, is it something that you're conscious of or want to achieve, is like a sense of like humor?
I mean, I feel like humor, you know, I think I want to be direct and say that I think that comedy is the highest art form, you know, and humor is the highest art, higher than music, higher than visual art, whatever, you know, to make people confront their most despairing, disgusting aspects of humanity is the greatest art. And I think this is why humor is very useful in visual art, but still the words are, they are lacking, you know? There's like the word irony, the word snarkiness, the word...
I was like really trying to find a better word. But
no, but like I think irony, satire, these words are just, you know, they're open and shut cases. They don't contain the breadth of expression that humor is trying to achieve in visual art, which is also really open to interpretation. I just feel like all these things, like trying to ascribe a kind of notion to an entire medium of art making it doesn't reflect reality, you know, and that's when words need more words. We need to coin more words to express what we're trying to say, you know?
Thank you.
Thanks.
No more questions? Great, okay. Well, can we have another massive round of applause for Fatima Al Qadiri today?